Hello everyone, welcome back to another tutorial video. I already made a video how to install Metal Gear Solid 2 plus some plugins to get ready for your speedrun journey. Now, since that video came out, a few people have come forward and told me about controller issues they had. Now, I just use a standard Xbox controller, but there's different ways how you can use different controllers as well. For example, a modern Dualsense controller from PS5. In this tutorial today, I want to show you a certain setup, how you can install MGS2, install vFix quickly, set up turbo and turbo display so you can see the text on screen when turbo's on or off. With that in mind, then we're going to show you also how to set up everything correctly for the controller setup, because Metal Gear Solid 2 only uses the Xbox setup really well. If you don't use an Xbox controller, I will then also go into how you can set up different controllers, such as a Dualsense or Dualshock 4, a Nintendo Switch Pro controller, and last but not least, also a DualShock 3 controller and even a DualShock 2 controller with a USB converter. All of these gamepads will be explained. We're going to go through them step by step. And of course, after that, you will be ready to run Metal Gear Solid 2 on PC in that way you feel comfortable with the controller of your choice. For starters, we're going to go and install Metal Gear Solid 2. I already inserted the disk, and now I can just install the game. We're going to follow it by clicking here on MGS2 setup.exe. Just go to install. And I already made a folder on my desktop here where I want to have the game installed. After you install the game, you can also move this game folder around. It does not need to be at one specific location. I'm going to click here. I'm going to actually go back here. I'm going to change that to not my network, but my desktop. No desktop, I'm just going to go MGS2. I'm going to go full game. I'm just going to quickly install it. After the install is done, you can go finish here. You can extract the DVD and just close it here. This icon will now launch Metal Gear Solid 2 normal, but before we do that, we also gotta quickly install vFix. You can get vFix in the link in the description down below. vFix comes in different versions. For me as a speedrunner, I personally like version 1.72, and based on how it's actually being controlled. So the movement in this version specifically is something that I like. Of course, you can also use later versions like 1.8, and of course the latest one, 1.81. There's no more further updates to the software, so you can freely pick and choose, and you can just play with the version that you personally like. 1.81 movement is closer to what the HD versions play like, so if you've ever liked the PlayStation 3 version or Xbox 360 version of MGS2, you can go with that. I personally will work with version, as I said, 1.72. For the installation process and how we connect the controllers, this does not matter at all. Now, how do we install vFix? Whichever version you have, when you open the zip file, you just have this MGS2 setup.exe. And where do you place it? Well, you place it, of course, where we have the game installed. In my case, that is here, this MGS2 folder. In this MGS2 folder, there are a few files, and I'm going to go to bin. Inside bin, there is already an MGS2 setup.exe. You're going to go ahead and drag this one from vFix and insert it in this folder. I'm going to replace it here. Double click it and follow the install instructions. It's going to patch the game into a version 2.0. And it can also say, hey, maybe you don't want to do this. Just say it's okay if you want to do this install. If it happens that this error message appears here, can't do action. It wants you to use the game in admin mode. For this, we go here, right click and select Run as Administrator. After you select Run as Administrator, now the game will actually load up here in the launcher. A few fixes are already being applied, and we can go and set up the game. We go to Settings, Resolution should be normal at 1080p, and Maintain Aspect Ratio can be set to on. You can also change these settings here. I personally will go with Window Mode, and in my main tutorial beforehand, I can use, of course, borderless gaming then to stretch the game again to be full screen. What's important for us here is that we're going to go to controls. And this is the trick how we can use all the different controllers. Don't go, of course, with no controller. We're not going to play on keyboard. And we are not going to play on DualShock 4. We're going to specifically pick Xbox and PS2 type. These are the buttons and combinations that we're going to press here. Xbox and PS2 type. It doesn't matter which controller you use. You can use a PlayStation Dualsense controller from the PS5. You can use a DualShock 3 from the PlayStation 5, or even later with a PS2 controller. Whichever version you pick, we will always go and select Xbox and PS2 type, because we're going to translate all the controllers that we can use over to basically become an Xbox controller. If you are using an Xbox controller, this is the easiest step for you, because your Xbox 360, your Xbox One, and your Xbox Series controller will natively work, of course, with Windows 10 and 11, and do not need to be translated first. So select here controls, Xbox and PS2 type. I'm going to do my standard changes here. I'm going to leave everything to high and going to go with effect quality low, just because of the so-called bleed bug. I'm also going to remove motion blur and depth of field, because I don't like these effects. Anti-aliasing can be up to your standard. Sound is all the same, and extra, we don't need to do anything here. But I personally want to just not have the reminder that vFix opens again after we close the game. I only need to use it once. I'm going to click save. And now I'm actually going to exit out of the game. You see, this folder has just again updated a few more things. We have now a scripts folder, which will be good for us because we're going to install a few plugins for Metal Gear Solid 2. And also there's a few more files, for example, the xinput plus file that we need. I'm going to exit here. Once we're done with everything, I'm just going to click save, and you can exit because you don't need to use the vFix launcher file here. You can just go directly to mgs2._sse.exe to launch the game. But for the first time launching, you want to go through vFix launcher just once. It'll start and then install even more files in your folder. And then you go. If you double click this little Windows bar here, it already full screens. And because it's windowed, of course, as I said, you can use borderless gaming, as explained in my initial tutorial, to make this game borderless windowed. So it's now actually a full screen game. Alright, I'm going to press escape to close it again. Because I will tell you now also how to enable turbo like you do if you want to speedrun this game. And if you want to use turbo like speedrunners do, or even if you just want to casually play and want to have turbo, the easiest thing that you can do is use the so-called vFix turbo. So vFix is the collection of fixes that we have here and updates that make Metal Gear Solid 2 run well on modern machines like Windows 10 and 11. And in this xinput plus ini file, there's a setting that we can use to make turbo happen. I can just right click here, go to edit, and have it open in, for example, Notepad. And here's a lot of text in here. The part that is interesting to us in order to set up, of course, turbo is going to be here. Go all the way down where it says rapid fire. Rapid fire in its whole section here are just there for us so we can set which buttons should be turboed and which button, of course, we can use as a toggle. You can use the on-off button here, for example, with start and guide. I'm going to use it personally as RSB. RSB stands for right stick button. And that's the button that we're going to press in the right stick and press it in. Also known as R3, for example, from the PlayStation controller world. Toggle on off, of course, is true. We can turn this on and off. If you set this to false, then you cannot turn it on and off. It will be permanently on. And enable it start true is also a nice setting, just so we have it already active. Now the buttons, of course, are what's important to us here. And we want to set it as follows. We usually want to have it on the 4 face buttons and additionally also on the start button. So with an Xbox controller, the 4 face buttons are called A. And then I'm going to insert this line. At least on my German keyboard, it's Alt and Control together, plus the button that's left to my Y key. Of course, it's just a special character of this vertical line here. It is not a slash and it's not a backslash. It's this specific vertical line. Additionally, we're going to use B, X, Y, excuse me, and additionally also start, which we all write in capital letters. You don't need to set any semicolon or something like that. Just end the line like this. One last thing that I want to do here. I'm going to go and change this setting here, mask toggle on off. I'm going to use this and set this to false. This is the exact setting that I personally use when I do speedruns, and they do work well for me. Specifically for speedruns, having turbo also active on start, plus holding down A and B, plus start together as a combination, makes it possible so that cutscenes can be skipped as early as possible. That's all you need to do in this xinput+.ini file. Just save by going to a file, save. Of course, hit the shortcut for Ctrl S. I'm going to save this file. And I'm going to set it under the properties to read only. This ensures, no matter which settings we change here in the vFix launcher, that turbo does not get turned off. If you go here into vFix launcher and go to settings, then you can do your changes. But if you click save, it will be like, oh, I cannot do anything. And that is because of this specific xinput+.ini file, which is now being read only. For the most part, once you set everything in your game, you don't want to change it anymore. And you just want to launch it through this MGS2_SSE.exe. Because of this issue with the read-only thing, and a few files have changed with vsfix, it can happen that you have this error. This error is just simple. There's a problem with the hardware structure, and you can only go OK. If that happens, go to Properties, unlock the file read-only. Open vsfix again. Go to Settings, click around a little bit. You don't need to change anything, just click Save. And once you start it, you will see that more things change again here. Because now the game actually launches normal again. We can close the game now. Go to xinput+, Properties, and set this file to read-only, so we don't accidentally change it. And go to mgs2_.sse. Now the game launches. But you will notice that Turbo won't work. Let me open up the file one last time and gonna open it again. If you change anything in these fixed settings, it will happen that this Rapidfire setting gets actually overwritten. So we have to insert it again. A, B, X, Y, and start. So I'm gonna set this to RSB. I'm gonna set this to false. Save. Once again, set this to read-only. And just forget that you have vsfix launcher. Honestly, you do not need it to launch the game. Just launch it directly with MGS2_SSE.exe. I've currently connected an Xbox Series controller, and an Xbox 360, an Xbox One, and an Xbox Series controller will all work out of the box with vsfix and MGS2. So the tutorial basically ends here how to set up the game with all sorts of Xbox controllers. As we can see here, I can launch the game, and I can go through the game here. I can go and start run. Go and start new game, for example. It's just a demonstration right now. Right, and when I press the right button, we should hear also that the game's turbo is being activated and deactivated.
Disable a rapid fire.
This is the standard sound that it does for vsfix. We can change that sound later. I'm going to show you. But this is the key aspect for us here when it comes to setting up MGS2 with any sort of Xbox controller and then activating turbo. I'm going to show you how to set it up with a Dualsense, Dualshock 4, Dualshock 3, and even a Dualshock 2. So you know if you want to use these controllers, how they work with the PC version here of Metal Gear Solid 2. Because Metal Gear Solid 2 is an Xbox port from the console game, yes, the console game to PC. Xbox controllers, of course, work natively the best. And with vsfix turbo, of course, we also automatically hear when it's been turned on or off.
Disable a rapid fire. Enable a rapid fire.
So before we go to the DualShock setups, we're going to quickly show you also how to install the latest ASI plugins in order to get the turbo display overview. Let's close the game, since we know all this works. And let's focus on the scripts file. In the scripts file, there are a few things in here. There's already a safe game location changer.asi and a few more plugins. These called ASI things are basically just little scripts that help us to set things about the game. For example, safe game location changer here. If I go and would open it with a notepad file, see like there's a bunch of noise in here. So for us, that's not important because we cannot change this. But what we know, if you go back to MGS2, after having installed vsfix, you can see here save data are inside my games folder. Let's go back and focus on scripts. It says that there's a few more plugins that we can have here. If you go over to BMN's website, which is of course linked in the description down below, with a few more ASI plugins here. Of course, you can get these here under mgs.woody.com, MGS2 ASI, again link is in the description down below. And these come with a few more things like wet percent, VR randomizer, VR info, unlock radar, turbo display, his own version of turbo, timer display, text change, soft reset, and so on. I'm not going to go through all of these because they are explained, of course, here on the website here. I'm going to go through the two most important ones. We're just going to copy this over here and put them inside the scripts folder. MGS2.asi is an external extra plugin from BMN. And inside this config files, there are a few more that we can enable. The easiest way to enable them is simply go and take them Turbo Display. I'm going to copy it by hitting Control-C. I'm going to go to Scripts, and I'm going to insert it here in Scripts. These .ini files we can actually edit. And as we can see here, they also come with a big set of text. There's a few more explanations in here. What's important to us is that we have Turbo Display Profile 1, text visible, yes. And especially Turbo Display enabled, yes. If we just put this in here, we have, of course, the chance to now test it. Turbo Display should be active, and I'm just going to launch the game again. We just inserted these files. And as we can see at the bottom right corner, just by inserting this file, we already see Turbo now as a little text.
Disable a
And we can click it again and still have the same fixed turbo sound, but now additionally also we have the text vanish, so we know turbo is off.
Enable a rapid fire.
Turbo's on,
Disable
turbo's
a rapid
off.
fire.
That's the easiest way how you can deal with this. Just get into your scripts file for MGS2 bin scripts and pull over the files that we downloaded from BMN. Just insert the MGS2.isi and of course the configs folder. From config files, you can copy over turbodisplay.ini, and then it's already in there. There's at least one more thing you also want to see, and that is timer. I once again copy this and insert it here at the top. I'm going to launch MGS2 again. Now, if I go and load any save, or if I just start a new run, we should also automatically see the timer running. Timer, of course, will start after this little text starts. And there we go. In the top right corner, we now see the actual in-game time. No settings required. Just copy the file over into the scripts folder and it should work right off the box. As you can see here, I can hold down many buttons and automatically fast forward here through the codecs and of course skip all the codecs and cutscenes as quickly as possible. You can, of course, if you want, go in and change even more. These files are literally just copied over, but of course you can go in. There's more explanations here. We have game time, real time, area game time, and real game time. And for some people, for example, there's also good to know the expected time. So if we go here and set text visible, yes, it will actually tell us the time as soon as we do the last slash on Solidus at the end of the game and the credits begin. It will display a little time that should be the same, of course, as the final IGT on your score screen. There's a few more aspects here that you can play around with. Some people also like to change the text color. For example, if you go timer and game time here, of course, text visible, yes, it's already set. And if we go to text color, we can set it to a different code. This is so-called HTML hex code. And if you want to find the color you want, HTML hex code, you can just Google like that. For example, here we have HTML color codes. I agree and I say I want to have blue text. Then we see, okay, it's 00FFFB. I can copy this, insert it here, save. And if I launch another run, now our timer should be blue. It's the easiest way you can do this. Feel free, of course, to play around with these plugins. There's so much more in there. I'm not going to go over all the details. For the purpose of connecting, of course, our controller, we already know what's going to happen next. And there we go. Now our IGT timer has a nice blue color, for example. All right, but what if we don't want to use an Xbox controller? What if we want to use a DualSense controller? The basic idea is that we're still going to have the same setup. We still have V-Sticks here with our controls being set to Xbox and PS2 type. Do not change them to DualShock 4, even if you use a DualShock 4. Still keep it on controls, Xbox, PS2 type. I'm going to disconnect my controller and I'm going to now connect a DualSense controller. PlayStation 5 controller, basically Sony's latest controller that you can have. Windows will now install and send out as a wireless controller. I'm going to actually close this MGS2 folder because we have done everything we need. Turbo is still in this xinput+.ini file. And in scripts, we have this little text that lets us know, of course, if Turbo is on or off, and the timer is there as well. Now, if I launch the game and we have a DualSense controller active here, the game's actually going to be like, hey, what's going on? Why does it not control anything? As I said, we're going to make basically every controller behave just like any Xbox controller. So as it doesn't work right now, what we're going to use next is so-called DS4 Windows. I can close MGS2 in this folder now. I don't need it anymore. I can launch it via the MGS2_SSE.exe file. And what I'm going to use now is so-called DS4 Windows. Just copy that folder over here, double click it to open it, and then we're going to go to ds4windows.exe. It will ask us to install some requirements like the Windows.NET desktop runtime. Just to explain what it is, this is basically just there so Windows has a reference For example, a program is being built with buttons. In order to know what a button does and how it does look like, we need a so-called runtime environment. This is basically just like a library, so we know how these elements in the program that has been written here are working together. We're going to agree to that and say yes. It will automatically open up another window here, and it automatically will start to download the exe. We have to manually install, of course. It can happen that you already have this installed and you don't need to do this step. If it doesn't ask you for this, then you're good. You can get DS4 Windows here from github.com/𝐸𝐭7 DS4 Windows. Link is in the description down below. You can get the latest version by going over to releases here on the right side. It will open this window here. You go down to assets, and for example, you can download here the x64.zip file. For very high chances, you always will have an x64 system because it's a 64-bit system. If you have a 32-bit system, you need the x86 file. And of course, I'm going to use the zip folder because I don't have 7-zip installed. I just have standard WinRAR. But any, like Windows out of the box can open zip files anyway, so I recommend using this version. Will always lead you to the latest one. So just go to the top, scroll down to assets, and get the zip file here for x64. After all of that has been installed, we can close it, and we can launch DS4 Windows again. And now we can also set where the information has been installed. Either go to program folder for those who prefer a portable program. And of course we have app data where it's tied to the user data. For the most part, I'm just going to leave it in program folder so I can move around my DS4 Windows folder because I don't want to have it on my desktop after the tutorial. After we click this, a few more things will open up here. And on first time loading, DS4 Windows will already give you a status message and also start with this explanation screen here. What we're going to use, we're going to actually install this VGM bus driver. It will automatically be downloaded and installed. And agree to terms and conditions and install. This bus driver is important for us, so we have actually drivers that work with Dualsense controllers and Dualshock 4 controllers. If we're on Windows 7, install the 360 driver. Because we're on Windows 10, we already have this driver. People that are on Windows 11 as well, they don't need to install this driver. It's already on your system. Next step is connecting your Dualshock 4 controller. And this program only talks about Dualshock 4, but it will also work with Dualsense controllers as we'll see soon. There's also an optional step that we can install HidHide driver and install the Faker input driver. We're not going to do that, and I'm going to explain in a second why. First, we'll go off to finish here, and we're going to click start. Start and stop, of course, if it started. It's basically there, so DS4 Windows is active. Once DS4 Windows is active, it will look at the Windows USB controllers. And you can see here, there's a wireless controller currently connected to the system by Windows. It doesn't recognize what it is. Okay, I found out restarting the program didn't do anything, but under settings and device options, there was one setting I didn't see, and that is that DS4 controller support and Dualsense controller support were not both active. Only DS4 controller support was active at the time being. So if your Dualsense does not connect, check, of course, that the Dualsense controller support works. Same thing, of course, with DS3 controller support. I would guess if you want to use a Switch Pro controller, I guess you can. It has the same buttons like any Xbox controller, so you can also technically use a Switch Pro controller to play MGS2 on. In fact, I'm going to grab mine and going to test it out. In any case, if you're here, just click X, go to controllers, and now with these settings on and a Dualsense controller connected to your system, mine's currently connected via USB, you can click start. And now the service will start and it will find the Dualsense controller as promised. Currently its color is set to blue, but you can change it also. Go to a custom color, let's say green if you want. Next, and now you look down to Dualsense and it will be green. As I explained, you need these for Windows to translate the Dualsense controller into something that Windows understands as an Xbox controller. The selected profile is default, and we're just going to make a brand new one. Just go to click new profile here. DS4 Windows will then ask us to select a preset. We're going to say yes to that. We're going to go with Gamepad, Xbox 360. Apply. Now we see here a Dualshock 4 controller, but don't worry, it's still working with your Dualsense. You can even, of course, change here little buttons that you want, but for the time being, we're just going to set this and give it a name like Xbox 360. Save, and if it's not already done here, switch to Xbox 360. Now, as we can see here, there's also a bar called X with an X down here. Well, this means that currently Windows can also access the original controller. What we can do here is go to settings and say we want to hide the DS4 controller. This setting does, after the service restarted quickly, as you can see now it's started again, that ideally Windows does not see the original DS4 controller, or in my case, the Dualsense controller. We do see, now that we have the setting here, that there is an Xbox 360 controller, which is the one that DS4 Windows provides. Go to default here, it should unplug the controller. Or alternatively, we go to stop the servers. Now the Xbox 360 controller has vanished and we only have these two gamepads here. You maybe only have wireless controller. If I start DS4 Windows again, we see here on the USB controllers. There you go, wireless controller quickly vanished and got replugged in again. And now additionally, we have control Xbox 360 for Windows. This is a setting you can do here on properties to see if everything works. I'm moving my left stick, I'm moving my right stick. And under advanced, you can also say which of the devices is your preferred one. We want to set the Xbox 360 controller as preferred. If you launch now MGS2 with all these settings and the DualSense controller connected, turbo's on. And if I press the right stick in, we see, now it's working. It's important that on this start screen here, there's no like red-ish background. Currently, it's just the normal green and blue hues. This means that at least on my computer, Windows has given MGS2 only the Xbox 360 controller. And I can restart it here, new game, for example, go to Tanker and just start quickly to see that everything works. As a little test, turbo is active. And of course, I can hold down here the options button X and O, which will be translated over to A, B, and start on the Xbox controller. If I turn on turbo, there we go, turbo on. That's why we need this little text just to know it's on, even if we don't have sound. And we see, okay, turbo's already working as expected. It's fast forwarding here. And I'm going to show you, based on the input viewer that I have, even though I press a PlayStation button here, there you go. This is my DualSense. And if I press my DualSense, the X button, it will work like the A button on an Xbox controller. Circle is punching, square shooting, and of course triangle is confirming. So I can go over the rating here. And press triangle again to get back up here. All the directions work, as we can see here. There's no problem with the movement. Can open here, of course. Run around, running, gunning. I can go first person like this. And equip, and I can equip other items here, such as the camera. And all the inputs work. As we expect. The right stick doesn't do anything here. Right stick is only used for later when Raiden has the sword and we're gonna fight Solidus. That's when we use the right stick. But as we can see here, yes, our DualSense has been now converted and actually works as an Xbox controller. I can play the game now like this. But as I said in the beginning, if it happens that your game in the start screen looks reddish, it might be that you need to hide your original controller. This is a thing that only happens if you're using a non-Xbox controller. If you use an Xbox 360, Xbox One, or Xbox Series controller, I said, of course, the game will work fine. In these fixed settings, it's set to an Xbox controller, and of course, it will work just fine. If you use something else, and this controller needs to be translated, such as our DualSense here, you can see that maybe sometimes they run into issues. So I'm going to quickly explain to you how you can use HidHide. The basic idea is we have like other controls connected to the system as well, such as the wireless controller, which is the original DualSense controller. We have set under Advanced tab that we prefer that any program that wants to have a controller uses the Xbox 360 controller, and in my case it works. For some other people it doesn't work. And we can see also here in DS4 Windows that this exclusive mode is actually set to shared. In order to set it to actually proper exclusive, we need a little helper program. And this little program is called HidHide. Just go here to HidHide drivers. You can download the latest version, which is only this x64 file, and install it. I already have the service installed, and this is how you set it up. I'm going to press the Windows key here, and I'm going to insert HidHide. And it will give you this prompt for the HidHide configuration client. Now, HidHide is a very nice little program. It allows you to tell programs that are basically whitelisted to see past the cloak. And on the devices, we also see a list that we have listed here. Now, with an HID compliant device on my system here that I'm going to hide. And in order to hide it, I'm going to set the check mark here. I actually don't know which one this is, so we're going to ignore this for the time being. You should not have this one necessarily. In any case, if you connect your DualSense, this will be this Sony Interactive Entertainment wireless controller. Set the check mark here. And now, when we close the program, the settings should go active, which means that the Xbox 360 controller will stay, of course, visible for Windows. And we can also see the effect already here in the USB game controller window. I can also just set it off here again. So it's visible, and now Windows knows again, there we go. There's the voice control that is just hidden from me. In my case, of course, we want to hide these. So just to quickly explain the chain, you connect your Dualsense to your Windows PC via Bluetooth or via USB. You then have DS4 Windows run with the settings and of course the supported devices. Under device options, make sure that these are switched on. And then you can set this to exclusive mode by basically installing another program called HidHide. Set the checkmarks here so they get hidden, and Windows can only see the controller that you emulated, this so-called Xbox 360 mode. Windows will then go like, I only see the Xbox 360 controller because it got translated by DS4 Windows and the original controllers got hidden by HidHide. You can close these programs. Oh, in this case, DS4 Windows wants to be minimized. And we know that Windows only has Xbox 360. Some users run into the issue, as I said, if the Windows system does see the rest on the original controller, that MGS2 doesn't want to work with it. So if you want to absolutely be sure that MGS2 works, of course, with your PlayStation controller, we're going to use DS4 Windows, and we're going to, of course, then translate over to an Xbox 360 controller. We're going to hide the original controller, and now it also works just as we expected it. There's no red shade in the background. In my case, it doesn't happen before anyway, but if it happens, you know, okay, we're gonna hide the original controller with HidHide. Super easy. Just install it, restart your system, and then in the HidHide client, set the checkmark for the original Sony PlayStation controller. Now, the good thing is, if you don't have a DualSense controller, you can also use a DualShock 4. I'm now gonna connect a DualShock 4 controller to my PC. I'm gonna use USB. Either launch DS4 Windows or if it's already open, just double click the icon at the bottom. And for DualShock 4 controllers, once again, make sure go to settings, device options, make sure that DS4 controller support is active. As we can see, that's already being connected here. We can see that works. And it might happen that, especially with DualShock 4s, MGS2 will still not accept the input. If we're going to open here and I'm going to press any buttons, it does work, but there's a few things why this does work. Now, if it doesn't work, the key difference here is that HidHide is active. Now, I already went ahead and hit this DualShock controller. I can activate all of them again. And I can stop the service and start it again. And it may not put this controller under exclusive mode. Now, in this instance, I got lucky. Checkmark has been set. And of course, even without hiding the controller, this HID compliant device is still visible, as we can see also by activating the USB controller. There you go. This window shows both controllers connected. So the original DualShock 4 controller is connected plus the virtual Xbox 360 controller. And it still works with MGS2. You can run into issues where MGS2 does not correctly do it. And for that specifically, we need to hide the original controller. So I'm going to go to HidHide. Once again, hide the original controller. As you can see in the Windows controller here, it's hidden. We only see the Xbox 360. And additionally on top, if you don't have this checkmark set here, stop the service and start DS4 Windows again. It's still set, of course, here to exclusive as seen by the checkmark. So that's the ideal state that we want to reach. And with everything done here, with the DualShock 4 controller, we can now go here and play the game. As you can see here, everything reacts to us, and we can start the run. Now, based on just having the inputs here, I know that's going to work. Now, as you've seen already before, DS4 Windows does not only provide service for DS4s and DualSense, it also additionally allows us to use a Switch Pro controller. I just happen to have one here, and I want to see if I can use it, of course, also for Metal Gear Solid 2 on PC. I'm just going to go over here and connect it via USB, and the controller is now connected. Windows will now go in and set up Pro Controller as a controller for the system. And there we go. Associated input controller 1 Switch Pro to virtual Xbox 360 controller in output slot 1. So DS4 Windows also allows us to use a Switch Pro controller. So we can use it here as an Xbox 360 controller. We're going to ignore that Windows asks us to restart the service. We don't need to do that. But it's interesting that DS4 Windows also additionally allows us to use a Switch Pro controller, as we can see here. Now, this is an example here how exclusive mode is not active. We have here shared access. And it may happen if I use MGS2 here that it's not going to recognize the Switch Pro controller as the main controller in this Xbox 360 mode. As you can see, I'm pressing also the button, and even my input viewer does not actually recognize this as the first controller. So I'm going to close it again. Once again, I go open HidHide client, and I'm going to hide this Nintendo Company Limited Pro controller to ensure that this one does get actually hidden from Windows, and only the virtual Xbox 360 controller gets seen by Windows. I'm going to stop the service for DS4 Windows, and I'm going to restart it. And ideally, only DS4 Windows now has access to the actual Pro Controller here from Nintendo. And will then set it also as exclusive mode. As you can see, exclusive mode is active with the key icon, HidHide access, which means that HidHide is basically in between DS Windows and Windows itself. And thanks to HidHide, we can see it now. If it's a check mark, DS4 Windows itself was able to set the controller as exclusive, meaning that only DS4 Windows itself can see the original controller, which is the Nintendo Pro controller, and then forwards it over to Windows itself. If it's a check mark, it's itself. If it's this key item, we use HidHide. Both versions are exclusive mode, as long as it's not a big X. Big X means there's a shared access. We don't want to have that. I'm going to close DS4 Windows and I'm going to open MGS2. And now, using the Nintendo Switch Pro Controller, I'll be able to play on MGS2. As you can also see here, my input view also recognizes now the Switch Pro Controller as an input method. I'm just going to quickly start a new game here on Tanker, just to see that it works. And once again, all the buttons are basically standards set as you expect them. The right option button is set to basically the start button on the Xbox controller. And X, O, square and circle on my input viewer are basically A, B, Y, and X from the Nintendo Switch Pro controller, which gets translated over to the A, B, X, and Y controller inputs on the Xbox controller. As you can see here, my Nintendo Switch Pro controller now works. I can use both the menus. I can run around, of course, here with run and gunning and go first person. X works, circle works, square works, and of course triangle works as well. If I go over the rating here, we can see that it works. And by God, is vibration strong in the Nintendo Switch Pro controller. I just noticed that. In any case, as we can see here, thanks to DS4 Windows and exclusive mode, we can also use a Nintendo Switch Pro controller on Windows 10 and 11. For example, like old games like Metal Gear Solid 2. Now, what if you want to use a PlayStation 3 Dualshock 3 controller? DS4 Windows does provide service under settings and device options to use a DS3 controller. But as we see, if I leave the option, it actually unchecks this option. Now, what do we need to do? Well, it's quite simple. We go to Controller Driver Setup, and in case we just didn't do it yet, we go to install the VGM bus driver. Now, this is one that we already have, but additionally also, we can install another driver from VGM. In the video description down below, you will find a program called DSHidMini. DSHidMini actually gives you support for DualShock 3 controllers. So you can use them, for example, as you can see, a virtual HidHide mini user mode driver for Sony DualShock 3 controllers. So we go to releases here. And as you can see here, if you scroll down to assets, we go to DSHidMini and get this zip. I already have the zip here, so I'm gonna open the zip file here. I go new folder and call this DSHidMini. And I'm gonna put all the files from the zip file in here. I will leave the how to install link, of course, in the description down below. And following this, now we can actually easily connect our DS3 controller and actually start converting it into a different controller. So all the start begins here. As I've opened here my folder in DSHidMini, x64 DSHidMini, this is where we go. We're going to go to this DSHidMini.in file, right click and install. And open it, accept the USC prompt on Windows, and now we install it as a driver. This operation completed successfully. Wonderful. In the next step, we're going to go over to this igfilter.inf. Now, once again here, right click and hit install. Accept the prompt again for Windows admin, and the operation completed successfully. Now connect your controller via USB. This will automatically pair to your Windows Bluetooth host if you have working Bluetooth at the time of plugging it in. With the controller connected by USB, open the DSHidMini control utility. Only now we actually open this program. And now, after we install the drivers, which are in DSHidMini x64 DSHidMini, then the program can actually see also our DualShock 3 controller here. We need to actually run this program as administrator, so let's do this again. Right click and run as administrator, or just as we did it before, create shortcut, drag the shortcut to desktop. On this shortcut, go to properties, compatibility, and checkmark run this program as an administrator. And now running as admin, we can download also more drivers. There's a Bluetooth P3 Bluetooth driver here that we can install as well. We'll install this for the x64, which is my 64-bit Windows 10 version, of course. Yes, we want to execute this file, and yes, we go more if we run anyway. we're going to install this driver so we can use the DS3 via Bluetooth even. Now, this program requires me to restart the PC so all the drivers are active. So we're going to do that quickly. Alright, now in order to make this PlayStation 3 controller, or DS3, work, of course, with DS for Windows, we gotta go and change it. So we go to HID device mode and set it to DS for Windows. There's also different modes like SXX, which works for RPC3, and SDF, which works for PCXS2. So you can get pressure sense abilities in PlayStation 2 emulation or PlayStation 3 emulation. Once again, we're gonna go to DS for Windows, and we're gonna click Apply Changes. Now, if the program can do it on its own, whereas we can see here, failed to restart device, the settings have been saved, but couldn't be reapplied. Please manually reconnect the device for the changes to become active. I'm going to go OK. I'm going to unplug the controller. I'm going to plug the controller back in. And once we plug the controller back in, it should reconnect. Now it's set to DS for Windows. DS for Windows also means that it's going to be hidden from Windows. And if I open DS for Windows again, as you can see here, DS for Windows is starting. It actually recognized our DualShock 3 controller. Go to Settings, Device Options. There's no DS3 controller support necessary for it, just the DS4 controller support. And once again, we can translate now this DualShock 3 over to an Xbox 360 controller with the profiles that we can set up in DS for Windows. You can close all these programs, and just to confirm again, even in Windows it says Controller Xbox 360 for Windows is the only connected controller. If I launch MGS2 now, and I'm going to open up my input viewer, we can also see turbo on is active. And if I press the right stick in, turbo gets turned off. And if I go and start run like new game, tanker, normal, right, I1. I can also hold down these three buttons, for example, start X and O, just like I do on an actual PS3 controller now. And it will automatically skip through all the codecs and cutscenes. And once we're inside the game, we can see that everything's working. I can run around, full 360 angle. I can go first person. I can even go and hold on my gun. I can tap R2 and L2, of course, to do menu changes here. I can even, of course, open the codecs here and pause the game. All the four buttons work. So go down on it like this. Now it needs to be said that the PC version of MGS2 is based on the Xbox port. And as far as I know, there's no pressure sense. Right, so when you put down your gun, it can only work like this where you run against the wall, for example. And that way, Snake can only shoot. But yeah, this is how you connect a DS3 controller to your Windows 10 machine, translate it with DS for Windows, and then have it work as an Xbox 360 controller, and can run Metal Gear 2 PC with a DS3 controller. Now, if you want to use a DualShock 2, funnily enough, the same setup that we already used for DualShock 3 also works with a DualShock 2. The only thing, of course, that you need is to have a DualShock 2 controller adapter to USB. If you plug in the USB and basically do the same thing where you install the DSHidMini drivers and then open DSHidMini control to set it to head device mode DS for Windows, once again, DS for Windows can recognize it, funnily enough, as a DualShock 3 controller, but that then will translate all the inputs from a DualShock 2 also over to an Xbox 360 controller. And to prove, of course, we can open here, Metal Gear 2. I can press in the right button to activate and deactivate turbo. And also new game, if we quickly launch into tanker, we can see that everything works. The thing with DualShock 2 is that its pressure sensitive triggers, of course, are a little bit finicky. So when I try it, at least I noticed that when I press in R2 and L2, it does get recognized quite quickly from the input overview that I have used right here. And if we go into in-game here, we can see like, oh, it's all working. Go like this. I can press X. Turbo works, of course, as well. Not even if I turn off turbo. I can walk around, I can run a gun. I can go over the rating to confirm triangle works. And of course as well, X and circle work. D-pad works. R1 works. First person works. And then R2 and L2, you see here I press them, but they don't recognize. I actually have to press them in quite a distance to actually make them work. So it's not just tapping the trigger necessarily, but actually pressing them in all the way in order to get the full effect working. I'm not too sure if this can be mitigated, But technically, this is how you translate a DualShock 2 over into the PC version for Metal Gear Solid 2, just like you do with a DualShock 3 controller. Alright, and that's the tutorial. I hope you took something away from it, how to run your controller setup the way it works for you, of course. And remember, this tutorial is not just for Metal Gear Solid 2. You can technically do any old game like that. If you just translate any controller over to an Xbox 360 controller, the compatibility to especially older games is quite high thanks to this way. So you can use it for not just MGS2, but any other game as well, specifically where an Xbox 360 controller is just better and it's just better prepared to use rather than any other controller like a DualShock 4, for example. All right, thank you so much for watching, of course. Check out the original MGS2 setup video right here, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.